everyone, welcome back to my channel in time for Halloween Horror Month. This is the final installment of Bloodline Curse today for your enjoyment. I hope that you are enjoying the story. I invite you to sit back, relax, and let me take you back to 1492.
Aren't you tired of the drama? You use your words like they are knives. I don't need that type of drama and trying to be tough all the daytime. You try to make yourself feel better by taking me down. Once I fell, but now I'm strong, I'm ready for
Queen Wilhelmina. The chamber was cold without my husband, and I wanted to run out to find him. Word was that she had arrived here in the palace walls, and her warriors were given the entire west wing to stay in. There were 2 guards standing outside my door to keep me from leaving. My thoughts were running wild, and although I stood strong when in public, inside of me, I was falling apart. I heard the door opened, and I turned to find Ulrich entering with a tray of fruits. His eyes told me he had been ordered to stay silent and only to feed me. "You cannot leave here without telling me something, Ulrich. I demand you to share the news. Where is His Majesty, and where is she? Are they together?" I asked, my voice near breaking. "My queen, I am here to deliver you food, and nothing else, by order of the king." "And I order you to tell me," I cried. But his eyes lowered to the ground and remained silent. Fine. If this was how it was going to be, I would go against his order and forget everything else. I pushed past Ulrich, who reached out to hold me, but I gave him a glare and he dropped his hand. He stepped away and lowered his gaze as I walked out. The 2 guards tried to stop me, but by Ulrich's gruff order to let me go, they remained behind. I raced down the stairs as carefully as I could, and I entered the dining hall where I found my husband sitting at the front, with a woman who wore a very low-cut armor sitting beside him. She had the most green eyes I'd ever seen, and everything about her was reeking seduction. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, and a smile spread across her face. But my husband's eyes darkened, and he stood up immediately. "My lady, what are you doing here?" he asked. Ulrich entered a moment later, and he lowered his head. "My king, forgive me. I dare not to keep her." "You can go, Ulrich." He left, and King Ormond walked toward me, but the woman beside him stopped him by putting a hand on his arm. She stood and walked toward me, her eyes never leaving the swollen belly. "You are carrying a child," she asked. "Who are you?" I asked her. She cackled and crossed her arms. "I am the woman who would be sharing your husband's bed, my lady. I hope that you will not interrupt us, for I aim to be just like you." My heart ached, and seeing her before me made it harder to entrust my husband to her. "For the sake of our kingdom, I bestow the task upon you. I trust you will do your duty of saving our people. I do not make empty promises. But you must know that I also demand to be paid handsomely as well. I know your heart must ache, for I would be the one who would be recording your husband's pleasures in my mind. But I promise you that once a child is embedded in my womb, I shall leave and never return." I began to shake, and I only nodded. I glanced at my husband, who had remained silent. I began to back away and turned before my tears fell down my cheeks. I heard the woman laugh as I made my way back up the stairs, where Ulrich was waiting for me at the door to my chamber. "Forgive me, my queen," he whispered. "I did not want you to witness this scene." I wiped at my eyes. "It is quite all right, Ulrich. It is not any of your doing. Might you be a champ and fetch me a warm bath? As you wish, my queen." He left, and I walked into my chamber, where I fell to the bed and began to cry. My hands fell to my unborn son, and I muffled my sobs into the pillow, the pain overwhelming me as I let out my jealousy, my envy, and my hurt. The idea of my husband entwined with another woman just doors down from me was something that was killing my inside. The door opened, and I turned to find my husband entering with Gemma behind, with a barrel of hot water. He poured it into the basin and ordered her to leave. He came to me, and I sobbed as he picked me up, holding me until I felt as if my head was going to explode. "Why did you go against my order?" he asked. I sobbed and remained silent. "I did not want you to see her. She is poison, and you are too pure. Why did you disobey me?" I lifted my head up and stared into his eyes. "I had to see what she looked like. Do you find her beautiful?" He shook his head. "Not for a single moment. The woman in my heart has always been you." "But you would be exchanging bodily fluids with her, and pleasures it must be found in order to do that. As much as I am strong, this part of it still hurts me, my king." "She has yet to fulfill her promise. Until she does, I shall remain distant from her. You have nothing to fear, my lady. Pleasures can be found anywhere, but love is rare, and it is only with you." King Ormond. The castle walls were silent as I made my way down to the dungeon where Kwang insisted to be housed. I heard her rambling some strange chants, and when I entered the room, she was peering into a pot of boiling water, the steam rising in between us. "You devoured the man on the ship. Was there something you were afraid he would tell me?" I asked. She laughed and walked to me, her eyes misty and glowing. "He was an old fool, yearning my body, King Ormond. Whatever he would share with you would be desires rejected. Old tales better told to the dead. I have no hidden agenda from you, and I do not intend to hide anything. You, however, have lied to me." I frowned. "How so have I lied?" "You did not tell me about the butcher and his daughter." "I honestly have forgotten about it, Kwang. I remembered only when he mentioned it. And yes, the butcher's daughter did marry a son from the southern lands. A lamb was received, and there was a feast, but not one of us from the palace walls went to join." "So he is right. Only the commoners are the ones dying. Did you think there was a mistake in the exchange?" "What do you mean?" "I think the lamb was meant for you and your kind, but the commoners mistakenly took it to devour. If you fed it to the ones behind the wall, you and your entire palace would be dead. Did you think of that?" I had not actually, I thought. It never entered my mind. I shut my eyes and let out a groan, feeling as if I had failed everyone. Normally, anything that comes through would be inspected by the butcher himself. He had extended an invitation to join them that night, but we did not. She walked back to the boiling pot and poured what looked like red powder and began stirring. "I can cure the plague by having everyone drink this. It would not taste heavenly, but it would help clear everyone within a day or two. But I insist that you find out where the butcher and his daughter disappeared to. Otherwise, your horror is yet to begin." Nodding, I replied, "I understand. I thank you, Coin." She looked at me and smiled. "Thank me by giving me a son when I have cleared everything to your heart's desires. I demand you do as you promise. If you back out from this, I will take the child the queen births." I walked to her and leaned toward her. "If you touch my queen, I will peel your flesh off with my bare hands." She smiled and reached out a hand to touch my arm. "A man after my own heart. Fear not, my king. As long as you do as promised, your queen shall remain safe. She is so innocent, and just by smelling her, I can tell she has only had you between her thighs. What a gift that is for you, my king, to be the only one to deflower such a beautiful maiden." I backed away from her. "She's my one and only, Quang. Remember that while you reside in here." When I entered the chamber where Wilhelmina slept, my heart was aching from her sobs earlier in my arms. It was never my intention to let her see Kwang, but with her stubborn mind, I knew she would defy my orders. When she walked in, my heart broke at the thought of what was searing through her mind. She was my innocent woman, and the things Kwang had been exposed to was nothing I wanted to taint her with. She was lying in bed, one arm across her swollen wound, the other across her forehead, deep in sleep. This was how I always wanted to find her, sleeping peacefully, even if I fought demons. I vowed I would end this nightmare for the kingdom. The following morning, I walked downstairs to find Kwang pouring red dark liquid into tiny little capsules. She had worked all night long, no doubt about it. She looked up at me as she finished the last one, and a smile spread across her face. King Ormond, I suspect you are here to witness a miracle. Be blessed that I have found a cure. The taste is not going to make your heart swell, but the solution will be the cure to death. My warriors will deliver these to the villages, and you can make the announcement for each family to take one. All you need is a drop, and it is safe enough for a babe who still feeds a mother's breast. I let out a breath of relief and I walked toward her. Kwang, if this brings a peace to my kingdom, I shall reward you handsomely. Smiling, she replied, I do not need much but what you promised. And remember, my king, I shall only take yours and none other.
You came in like a storm with no warning, swept me off my feet. It was a deadly dance, and I knew if I stayed, I would never leave. 'Cause you had my heart in your hands, soft like a summer, and then was a deadly.
Kwang. The hatred of eyes gleamed at me with extremity as the king and I arrived at the villagers' doorsteps. Many of them shielded their children's eyes, and some even their husbands. But my woman and I stood our ground, and despite being hissed and spat at, we remained calm. All night long, I concocted an antidote from years of practice of healing and magic. No one knew of these rituals, for they were sacred and given only to the Eastern people. Not one man dared to become a husband and shed only his seed to us, and we birth only daughters and never sons. The history of our people will forever be stained with lies and deceit from that one reckless night of passion. But the curse could not die until a king's seed birthed us a son, and through centuries of lies and waiting, no one saved any of us. Immortality became us, and we became it through the years, forever staying young, forever staying cursed. My people, King Ormond said, a saving grace has been delivered to you today. Kwang and her warriors have found a cure. I am here to request that each family take one capsule to feed you and your household. It is a safe concoction that even a babe can take. Within a day, you shall be saved, and the lives of our people once again have laughter and hope. A woman stepped up and spat on the ground. Pee! I will never take anything that witch makes. It will make my husband hunger for her. I laughed and stepped forward as she retracted to her place before. My, how ungrateful we are. For centuries I have fought worse than you, woman, and today you dare to go against me at a time when your kind are dying? I am not the one losing breath and stool. If you do not want it, I shall give it to another. And if you do not take it, I am sure the king will banish you to keep you from spreading the disease. The woman stepped forward again, but Ulrich put a sword on her shoulder. Then he turned to the man beside her and said, Put your wife in her place, or I will. The man blushed and pulled his wife back as Ulrich sheathed his sword, and King Ormond stepped up. If anyone disagrees and refuses to take it, I shall have you removed. He took one of the capsules, opened it, and drank it. Ulrich was next, and upon seeing their king take it, the villagers followed until every single person had taken a capsule and fed it to their household. In a day, you shall find that you will be safe. I ask that you remain in your homes until then and keep your doors closed, King Armand said. I hopped on the dragon head and watched as King Armand sat on his horse by the dock of the bay with his men at arms. From above the tower, I noticed his queen watching me. I simply smiled and bid the king farewell as my dragon lifted me up and into the sky. My woman warriors followed, and the wind whipped through my hair as my eyes matched that of my dragon's, creating a night vision of what looked like a magical kingdom from the ground. I was a fierce warrior, trained through years of magic and arts of healing, but the story never started that way. The story began way back with King Ormond's forefathers, who wanted a marriage treaty with my great grandmother, only for land and never for peace. The result ended up with her body being ravaged and left to die in the woods, while he went on to live a happy life with a bride from the south. My great grandmother suffered a horrible miscarriage, where she bled for days until finally she died, and on her deathbed cursed the woman of the East for never bearing sons, for sons carried a weapon between their legs that would ravage the world. If no one paid us the seed of a child, we would have the dutiful right to use our own magic to rid of them. King Ormond's great grandfather had been the first of many who would never do as promised. But I felt we were done hiding, and if King Ormond did not deliver, I could certainly bring the darkness to his world. I was the queen of hell, and demons was what I knew. I devoured men like him for breakfast, and I didn't care who stood in my way. But to end this curse was to deliver a son. A man of the first man who did the harm would be the answer. But to seduce such a man as him would take time, for I knew who he held in his heart, and it was only his queen. I had to outshine her and best her in everything before he would dare glance at me. When I arrived back at home, my warriors and sisters came out to greet me as I set my dragon free to his lair. They were all hungry for men and freedom. Their eyes were telling me they were done living this way. The price they had paid for the sins of our great grandmother was enough. A child has been given to you, Selina, an elder sister asked as she stepped forward, her black nails sharp like a sword. You cannot ask me that right away, sister. The work has been done, but the seduction is boiling right now. I shall return on the morrow and hear of the results of the concoction. It will be a waste if he doesn't give you a child. We have been trapped here for centuries. The plague has come at a perfect time. I frowned and I narrowed my eyes at her. Did you have something to do with it? When she didn't answer but smile, I rushed over and clutched her throat, squeezing until her eyes bulged. Who gives you the right to play God, sister? Your hand in this has been terrorizing mankind. She laughed through gasps. And it is through terrorizing that brought them to our doorsteps, Quang. If it wasn't for my healthy dosage of the illness, would you think King Ramon would come to you? I am exhausted of living like rats. I demand to be saved and to be reborn, and only by having you birth us a son can that happen. Demand a son from ancestor. Save us all. I let her throat go, and she coughed wildly as she got on her knees. Be glad I did not take more than just a few breaths from you. If you ever interfere again, I shall eat you alive. I lifted my head, and I hoped that in my heart, King Ormond wouldn't follow his forefathers' steps. Prepare, sisters. Mankind has never allowed us to live with content. We must prepare. King Ormond. The celebration music was heard through the wind as I embraced my queen on the balcony, watching the lights glow from below. Once again, the land was merry with glee, and the happiness that was passed from one to the other reached my ears. Everyone was celebrating life again, and I could release my hold on the fear that I would lose an entire kingdom. My king, you have saved your people, my queen whispered. You should be very proud. I am, but I am more proud that you stood by me. And then I turned her around. I will send Ulrich to do the deed. Her face broke into horror. My lord, you cannot do that. If she finds out, she won't, I said. I know of a way. I have thought long and hard, and I cannot do as she has asked. Any child born from me will have a chance at the throne, and I do not want bloodshed between brothers. I have thought of it, and I shall do this. My method would leave her in the dark, and by the time she knows it, the babe will be born. Ulrich has agreed. She pulled out of my hold. My lord, a woman knows the body of a man, can smell the scent, can understand the movements. You cannot do this. You saved the kingdom with one hand, and now you will murder all of it with the other. If this was your plan all along, why not just leave them to die with the plague? Why bother saving anyone? I reached for her. I cannot stand to lose a part of me with her. She will bring that son to attack us one day for the throne. Will you set aside your son if hers should best and win? She laughed and shook her head. This is madness. A promise is a promise, and you stood so gloriously in front of your council to win this part of the agreement. You cannot go back on your words, my king. I won't allow it. I touched her cheeks and smiled at her, seeing the emotions she held in her eyes. My lady, this is not a battle for you to fight. I am protecting you, none other than you. I have talked to Ulrich and we have agreed. Everything can be done if we do it according to plan. I am the best at war formations for battle, and I've gained hefty victories. Trust me. The tears that spilled over her cheeks were tears of hate. She backed away from me. You are a dishonest king, my lord. No matter how much it hurts me to see you lay with her, I would have had the best honor held for you if you kept your words. Do not use this distrust of a promise in my name. I do not stand for it. This is the reason why men go to war and never stop fighting violent battles. You never keep your words. You say one thing and do another while expecting the other to continue to endure. Anger fumed me as I walked to her, and I should just sit back and let her rob a child from me. Then you should have thought of this before you made a promise with her. She cured the kingdom, my lord, and you cannot go back on your words. I am not going back on my words. I am giving her a child. Just not my child. She sobbed. Exactly, my lord. She wants yours only. But you are too ignorant to realize that this will hurt you more than the plague did. This time you really put your own hand to murdering your own kingdom. You will go down in history as a king who broke all the bylaws their forefathers set in stone. The decision was made. I wouldn't turn my back on it no matter how much my queen begged and pleaded. If I went through with it, I knew that one day she would bring the son to sit on the throne. I couldn't allow that, and it was what my own forefathers feared. I knew that was the reason why it made us enemies. I would be repeating the footsteps of my own forefathers. My king, Ulrich said as he entered my chamber, everything is set for the morrow eve. I nodded. Excellent, Ulrich. Make sure nothing goes wrong. You and I are of the same build. She would not be able to tell the difference between us. Make sure she keeps the blindfold on at all times, and seduce her with all your might. As you order, my king. He left, and I gathered my armor and sword together as Wilhelmina entered the chamber, her eyes heavily filled with tears, and her lips in a saddened state. I hadn't heard her laugh or seen her smile since I broke the news to her. You leave today to create a diversion, my king, and you look so bold, so proud to be doing such a deed. How I thought you were so brave once, my king. Now I cannot even stand to look at you. I reached for her, but she backed away from me. You need to understand my choices, my queen. They are done for you. No, they are done for yourself. I play no part in this twisted, sick game of yours. You cannot promise someone something and then deliver something entirely different. What makes you think you are a good king if you should offer this to her instead? And what of Ulrich's feelings? He has been ordered. Exactly! He's been ordered! His words are silenced by your demand. You are asking him to gift away a child because you dare not to. What kind of man are you? What kind of king are you? She asked as her shoulders heaved heavily, and then she shook her head and walked to the door ready to leave. You are a coward, my lord. You can't even simply do as you promised. The entire kingdom relied on you, and you have left them to burn. If she comes with the full force to rid of everyone, I hope you can stand your ground then. Your tongue has spoken so much lies. I will be with you until the end of time, my lady. You will understand my choices one day. She smiled sadly and replied, I am afraid I won't. She left, and I held my hands together, staring at them, wondering what tomorrow would bring. The cave where I was to meet Kwang was deserted and high on the hilltop, where the wind was cold. I hadn't been there before. I hadn't been there before, and I had left behind small droppings of trails for Ulrich to follow. When I arrived, I was alone, and the air was crisp, an eerie feeling that formed around me with a fear that threatened my plans. I could hear whispering around me and a faint echoing formation through the rocks, and then I heard scattering. I turned and found what looked like a long tail disappearing into the darkened hole before me. Hello? I called out. I followed and peeked in when I saw what looked like two green eyes staring back at me. I tumbled backward onto the ground as something emerged from there. It was tall, lanky, with thinning hair and a smile that ripped its cheeks from ear to ear. A thin, clear liquid began dripping from its long tongue, and it leaned down on me. King Ormond, it whispered, you dare to fool me? It pounced on me, and its legs trapped mine as it lowered its head toward me, the green eyes I recognized as Kwang's. I tried to move, and she screamed, her voice breaking my eardrums. She was suddenly shoved off by Ulrich, who helped me to stand, and we both withdrew our swords. A shrieking cry was heard across the land, and she lashed out her half-foot-long tongue at us, breaking Ulrich's flesh as she laughed and jumped from corner to corner, her body transforming from the strange species back to her original self. She was heaving, and her eyes held a dark glare that was new to me. The both of us held our swords strong as fangs began growing from her lips. You lie to me, King Ormond, she whispered. I saved your people. You have turned your back on me, just like your forefathers. My warriors were right. You would follow suit in their footsteps. Your tongue speaks nothing but lies. You would bring that son to challenge my throne, I said. Says who? Your greedy heart? She asked. I do not care about the throne. I want to end this bloodline curse that your forefathers started. I frowned. What do you mean? She walked toward us, looking from me to Ulrich, and then back at me. Your kind brought us the curse because your forefathers destroyed us. To end this curse, I need a child from you. You promised me a child! How dare you go back on your words, King Ormond? I should have let your people suffer. I was going to give you a child, Kwang. Even if it was not for me, it would still be a child. But your presentation today has left me retracting my choices. There will never be a man who will gift you a child or lift this curse. Her eyes glowed and she smiled. Fine. The choice has been made. I shall show you who I really am. She smiled and blew us both a kiss that sent a fog of white smoke around us and then disappeared. Kwang. The utter disbelief tore at me as I settled in my chamber, my sisters hounding on my back, telling me how they knew it would turn out this way, their cries echoing through the village, claiming me as the person who allowed foul play to occur. I was trembling with hate at the thought of King Ormond, but he had forgotten who I was, and if he wanted to play with my heart and not deliver when I had saved his people, I would bring him to a hayvac unlike any he had ever experienced. If he thought the plague was frightening, he was in for a surprise. I gathered my sword and walked out of my chamber as my sister warriors stood, ready for war. My apologies, my sisters. They may not hold unto their promise, but we certainly can show them the kind of horror we can bring to the world. Who stands with me? Everyone shouted a war cry, and I smiled. Let us go proclaim our names in glory. The wind was wicked as I rode my dragon into the kingdom. The earth below me was pulsating, giving me the vibe that made me want to sing with glee. I laughed as thunder roared above me, and I whispered my chant to start a fire from the crackle of lightning. It sizzled and hit the top trees near the entrance of the palace, and the guards began running, hitting the drum war, alerting of intruders. Run, human, run, because your flesh will be bearing my teeth marks soon, I cried. I flew down my dragon just as I saw King Ormond push his captain of the guard down and close the latch. My king, you dare to escape from me? How insulting, I said with a smile. Remove yourself from my grounds, witch. Laughing, I replied, why do you treat me as if you have not yet tasted my flesh? A man will always be weak by the sight of a woman's thigh. He removed his sword from his side and brought it to my neck, ready to behead me at any time, but the gaze I gave him told him fear was nothing of my concern. Go ahead, I threatened. Go ahead, my king. The blade has been yearning for the taste of my blood. You have killed my people. What more do you want? My eyes darkened, and then smoke started rising from the pores of my skin. Screaming, I felt the pressure as the little snakes emerged from my flesh, their little heads hissing and biting at him. What do I want? Why, I want you, my king. You came to ask me for help to cure the plague in your kingdom. I gave you the gift of life in return for your love. Yet you will only lay with your queen, and not me. I laughed, and a trickle of blood came oozing down my chin. Why not me? Do I reek of the blood I consume from men, or do I remind you of your darkest pleasures? And then I grabbed his neck, slamming him against the wall, my lips inches from his, and my breath came out in haggard pants. King Ormond, I demand payment for my services. You owe me a life. He brought up his hands and swung his sword, cutting my arms in half as I howled and backed away from him. I gave you everything I had. Laughing, I replied, You did, but it is not what I want. I want a son, and not just from anyone, but from you. Give me a son! He swung his sword, and I opened my mouth as a huge green snake emerged and it hissed at him. He swung at it and broke it in half, turning itself into two snakes coming at him again. I began chanting, and in an instant the two heads enlarged and wrapped itself around him, pinning King Ormond down. His sword broke in half as I walked to him and lifted my skirt and climbed on top. I demand a son. I leaned down as he brought up a fist, sending me flying off of him. The warriors came down, their eyes casting fire into the village burning, turning the kingdom into ash. A wicked cry of pain echoed from my lips, and the flesh on my chest began to tighten, and it tore, revealing the bloody bone chest inside with my heart beating, pulsating with a loud thump. You shall be devoured and hung out to dry in the sun, I cursed, but you will give me a son. I am the queen of hell, and now you shall lay with me as I am. I felt the gurgling of the blood from my veins, and when King Ormond stood, his legs were shaking as he reached for a rock to throw at me. I ducked, and I came at him, wrapping my arms around his neck as my fangs sank into his flesh, ripping out skin and veins. He howled as he pushed two fingers into my eye sockets, and I felt the pressure. A roar was heard as I felt the swing of the sword, and it sliced open the king's neck, a river of crimson running down his chest. No! I cried. I turned and found the queen standing inches from me, her swollen belly protruding forward, with splatters of her husband's blood on her. Her hair was down, unruly, and she was shaking, but not with fear. My queen, I whispered, you dare to mock my pain by claiming my kill? A smile on her face as she lifted her hands, and the magic spell revealed who stood before me. I felt my heart race as I dropped to my knees, my thoughts running wildly. The rest of the warriors all knelt down on their knees, and a victorious war cry shouted in the air. My great queen, I whispered. She walked to me, and then threw Ulrich's sword on the ground. Taking place as the queen was the hardest row yet, sisters of the East, but I have saved us all. Inside of me is the king's son, and I shall end this bloodline curse. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this story. I certainly hope that you have enjoyed it. I will see you in the next episode.
Aren't you tired of the drama? You use your words like they are knives. I don't need that type of drama and trying to be tough all the damn time. You try to make yourself feel better by taking me down. Once I fell, but now I'm strong, I'm ready for the rematch. Shoot me down, don't you know I get up? Yeah, baby, I will fight. No, there ain't nothing stopping me. I'm bulletproof, I won't fall. I'm bulletproof, go on and shoot me down. I will always get up again. You're looking at me so cold. Get over yourself, are you?